Good morning, everybody. First of all, a hearty welcome to the ION, to the Innovation District. I am Michael Koenig. I'm an Associate Dean with the Jones Graduate School of Business and Executive Director for Executive Education. That is the non-credit portfolio, engaging with professionals, executives, and leaders from across the region and the nation here for Rice University. We're so pleased to have this incredible group of panelists who joined us. We're going to get started with our first panel here. I'm going to start by introducing our moderator, friend and a colleague from the Jones Graduate School and Verani Undergraduate School of Business, Don van Nippenburg. I do not know Dutch, so that was not well done. I just want to make that up front. Don, also, we love to play a little soccer in the old days. You may still. We love to go to soccer games, but I'm also very pleased that the Dutch are not coming up against the U.S. early in the World Cup. So thank you, whatever you did. I appreciate that. Don is a world-class researcher in the organizational behavior group, specializes in a lot of the nuances of leadership, teaches across some of our, especially in some of our deeper executive education custom programs with clients, some of which are represented in the partnerships and the corporate partnerships here on the wall. Don, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can get started for our panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Nothing happens without humans. As Anoop said, that's kind of the theme, in a way, of this first panel. I see my role as a moderator to speak as little as possible, so there's as much time as possible for our panelists to share their insights with you. So on that note, I would like to start with asking you to introduce yourself. Alex, would you start?
Sure. Alex Barreto from Dell Technologies. I'm actually originally from Brazil. I did not know you like soccer, so we got to talk about soccer later. But Alex Barreto, Dell Technologies, I have the opportunity of running our services business and our technology team, putting actual technology in practice at scale.
Okay. Hi, I'm Evan Collins. I'm a hand surgeon, but I have some other interests and opportunities. I work for Houston Methodist. I'm part of the Center of Innovation, and the title of Innovator in Residency really is based on my background to just try to combine the clinical practice and future innovation and make sure which one makes sense to use and create ideas about delivering care in a quality manner for as many people as possible is one of the missions that we have. So I'm fortunate to be here. These are really smart people. Hopefully I can contribute to some insights about healthcare for you guys.
Well, hello everyone. I'm Hema Prapu. I'm the worldwide energy industry leader at Microsoft. Yes, I do work for Microsoft, so we do understand ChatGPT really well. But, in my role, where I spend most of my time is not just on technology. It's really on strategy, leadership, and talent, where AI is already present everywhere. So how are we defining the future of work? Not the future of roles, but really the future of work with AI being everywhere it is today. So very glad to be a part of this panel. And my background is I came from the energy industry. So really pragmatic approach, engineer by background and not a tech person. So any question that you have today, please don't ask me any IT question, but really of where is AI heading into and where I'm seeing the transformation happening on a global level.
Thank you all. I would like to address the first question to you, Alex, but I'm explicitly asking you to chime in and share your views also, Evan and Hema. Alex, how are work dynamics changing with the rise of AI, and how do you manage that change?
Okay, so how are work dynamics changing, and how do we manage the change? Before I answer that, let me just put a shout out. Thank you for Rice University for pulling this together. Thank you for the sponsors, appreciate it, and thank you for the fellow panelists being here with us. The work dynamics, I spent a lot of time on that. Just for context, the services business that we operate, it's over 30,000 people across the globe in 150 countries. So what we do is sort of at scale. So the question is very relevant for us because it impacts us. It impacts us in a significant way. There are many vectors that can go down and talk about the impact, but notionally, I think of three things that are really important. The first one is this notion that knowledge becomes the center. And why do I say this? If I think about knowledge, the marginal cost of a unit of knowledge is going to zero. But the marginal benefit of a unit of knowledge is exponential. This has never happened before. This is like a massive delta between the value and the cost that you can get from knowledge. And if you see that and you know that this is happening, then the question becomes, how do you set up your org structure? How do you think about your talent? How do you actually think about your incentives? How do you actually set up your organization to capture that value and the fact that you have this very low marginal cost of knowledge? And Anoop actually touched on a point that's super important. So when you think about your data, when you think about how you think about customers, when you think about what data is actually essential for my business, what is not, it leads to business decisions on where you're going to host that data, not going to host that data. How are you going to extract the value? Because again, the value is exponential. And if you're not deliberate in thinking through that, you can make some decisions that can be perhaps not a force multiplier for your business. If you are deliberate, you can create massive competitive advantage. So knowledge becomes essential, and you have to think about, how do I translate that notion into action? The second big notion for me is this notion of speed becomes a force multiplier. And I think everybody knows that with AI, speed is sort of a central theme. But the question for me, and that I often ask the team, is, okay, we know that, but what are we going to do about it? And if we think about process enhancements and optimizing what we do, in the past, we used to think of a process, decompose it, and then you take the steps and you say, well, maybe I can optimize a process. Maybe I can automate a process. Maybe I can take a piece of the process out completely. And you get 10, 15% productivity and you're really happy about it. Now you can get over 50, 60, 70% improvement. When you're talking that type of productivity gain, it actually changes the conversation. Rather than a process improvement, it becomes why do I even have this in the first place? Can I reinvent? Can I reimagine how I actually do things? And that creates new business models. That creates new ways of actually working. That creates massive competitive advantage. And it's a huge differentiation. So if those are actually leaning in on the notion of speed and actually doing something about it, actually transforming the business. And I fundamentally believe this is a critical differentiator for companies. If you fast forward 3 years from now, the ones that are going to stand by and say, well, let me see what happens, and then I'll put my toes in the water. And there are going to be some that are going to say, well, I'll do it, but I'll do the proverbial POC, and then I'll launch a small, instance of this, and I'm going to try it out over here. But it's really sort of a special project. They're going to be slow in adopting. Meanwhile, somebody else is going to be going all in. They're going to transform the business model, not optimize an existing process. And it will create such a competitive advantage that will be very hard to catch up. So to me, the second point is this notion of speed. While we all know about it, you have to act on it. And if you don't act on it at speed, you can fall behind. So it's a very, very important point. And the third, and to me the most critical, and I did not know Anoop was actually going to talk about this, is this notion I call it structural change becomes real. Structural change becomes real. So what do I mean by that? If we think about our companies, it doesn't matter if it's a government, a nonprofit, corporate America. We are basically a system. Functions could be finance, accounting, marketing, engineering, services. But it's a collection of humans, organized in a certain way to deliver a certain value. And that system has a fabric. It has a DNA that it operates. We call that thing culture. Every company, every government, every nonprofit has culture, and it operates a very certain way. There are ways to operate. Some of them are codified, some of them are not. There are power centers, there are politics. All these things make the system work. You can argue if it's good or not, but that's how the system works. Well, with AI, that changes. So it changes at speed. And what Anoop was talking about, which I really believe in, and again, I didn't know what he was going to say, is if you're conscious about that, do you have the fortitude to make the changes that are required in this DNA? Because these are cultural fundamental changes which are difficult to make. Do you have the fortitude to actually make those changes to position your company, your team, the talent you have for where you want to go. And it's easy to say it. It's really hard to do because you're going to disrupt power plays. You're going to disrupt DNA. You're going to disrupt the way of the system operates. And there'll be natural sort of pushback. So your ability to actually bring the organization together and make that cultural change is going to be the thing that enables you to do the process change, make knowledge real. Otherwise, the first 2 points I made don't come to reality. So that structural change is fundamental. And I have internal conversations about this. You think about the talent you hire. You think about how you promote people. You think about the incentives you put in place. Are they the right ones for tomorrow? And it's oftentimes people say, no, we should change it. Okay, can you actually change it? What happens if you say my compensation structure is going to change from X to Y tomorrow? You will have resistance. If you say these following traits were the things that got people promoted, but tomorrow, no longer. These are the new ones. That's a huge change. And so being able to actually navigate that will create, in my mind, separation between highly effective managers, CEOs, COOs, and companies. And so navigating to that is, I think, critical.
So thank you so much. You're talking about a really important change management strategy. Hema, Evan, thoughts on this?
I was learning. Thanks, Alex. Change management is a big topic, but let's just start with healthcare is relative to maybe the companies that you guys deal with is a very unique aspect, but it makes up about $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion of the GDP. So it's a significant portion of our economy. When you're trying to deal with understanding it and figuring out where the technology gets best applied, there are so many different stakeholders that they operate in different ecosystems that have different reward systems. It's not like a company that goes and develops a better competitive product and then captures the ROI and shows return on investment. You have the providers. I'm a physician, so I provide. And then you have the deliverers in terms of the process. So the hospital is somewhat independent from the physicians. And that combination is what provides the healthcare. And so each one is looking for how we can do what we do better. But unfortunately, we're not in a free market system. It's a competitive system in the sense that there's a third-party payer. So there's lots of controls that go on. So for example, when we look at change management with applying technologies within a hospital, you got to divide it into two different types of technologies. One is, are you improving the process? Meaning the process that we define as making an appointment to see the physician, making your scheduled imaging, setting up time for the operating room, doing the PT or follow-up. So the nuts and bolts. And then on top of it is the revenue cycle. Are you capturing the revenue for what you're doing? So most of the technology up until like 2 or 3 years ago has been directed on how to improve the process of healthcare, and it's rewarded by creating efficiencies. So it gets adopted because it delivers on the bottom line as a savings to a budget often. The challenge on the future innovation is where not just the process has been kind of streamlined or squeezed to some degree as much as you can. At least I'll give you context. Again, this is just a perspective to show difference. You guys are the thinkers and you'll come up with creativity around it. But the next part of change management is really on how does this technology interface with the part that is yet to really been used, which is the actual care of the patient. So the decision making around the care of the patient, which is, I think, the next frontier and is not something that should be done lightly. But the change management around using different tools has always been a little bit easier to adopt because, for example, if I had a better scheduling system, I'm going to adopt it because it makes it more efficient and easier and it's less expensive. Those kind of parameters exist. But now we have a issue in healthcare where the supply does not equal the demand. So you've got a fundamental demand that you will not meet the supply, and yet our goal which is to be able to take care of any individual that is ill or needs help, which is, I think, a goal and what we want to do. But how do you do it in a way that doesn't diminish the quality of the care? Because you're not applying in every instance the amount of knowledge that you should to deliver the best results. So, getting access to a provider, if they're not as experienced, perhaps, you may not get the best result. And when you take care of people, it's great when you talk about large populations, but my mind is in a zero-sum game. If you get it right 99% of the time, but you get it wrong that one time, well, it's really bad for that one person. So I think the stakes are very high when you start to apply this technology. And these are the things that we think about in terms of where you're going to apply it, what kind of change management is done, and how quickly you want to adopt things. So our focus, or my focus in the projects we're working on, is not as much on the process side, but focusing on how this technology is going to be utilized in a way to enhance access with quality. And that's something to have a perspective about.
We'll revisit that issue also. Anything to add to this?
No, I like the fact that you use frontier. So in Microsoft, we've obviously coined the term the frontier firm. And what we are really seeing with change management, with AI, with agents, with agentic workflow is firms that are really leading this. It's really looking at redesigning work and not redesigning roles. Back to this, it's redesigning work and making sure that we're using AI to elevate human potential. And that's where we're seeing companies that are really taking its time, setting the strategy and ensuring leadership buy-in, top down, bottoms up. It's about redesigning work today. If you look at what the industry, especially energy, has gone through, we have gone through so many cycles, and the cycles are a lot more shorter. And what that really means is we are losing talent that would not come back to the industry. So today we are still producing just as much, and we're doing it with less people, which means people are working a lot more harder. So how can you eliminate tasks, mundane tasks, repetitive tasks, and analytics behind it, but making sure that human is still in the loop is where I see firms that are winning in this AI era that we live in.
Thank you. So I think you already started to answer the second question, but I want to direct to you, which is, I think, a question that is on many people's mind, which essentially is AI going to replace humans? And related to that, how do we manage, not just in a single company, but in society, the rise of AI?
Thanks for that. That was going to actually be the third question you're going to ask. But where I'm seeing AI, I'll talk about a real life experience. When we first started with Copilot, one of a chief operating officer called me and said, I've got 147 use cases. And I said, how did you operate before this? Your business was still running. And he realized when we throw a piece of technology out, there's a shiny new object. Everyone wants to adopt it, but they don't seem to understand. You need first have a strategy. How are you going to redefine your work? And what we're starting to see is AI is not here to replace human. It empowers human. It brings up the best out of us because now you can free your time from all the tasks that you normally have to do, whether it's checking your emails, responding to that, what's priority. When I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is with Copilot is tell me what's my priority today, because I wake up with 200, 300 emails in my inbox. But what's priority? And where do I have to focus my attention on the most impactful work that I can do daily? And where I'm seeing my customers transform is really defining the strategy and making sure leadership is helping in the strategy and defining it for the long term. It's about removing the tasks and making sure we elevate human and always have human in the loop. Because guess what? AI is not accountable. So if something goes wrong, you cannot blame the system. And that's why you continuously have to have human in the loop, but making sure you empower the human to make the right decision as well. And that's where skilling comes in. Training is very, very important. So if you look at the work that we're doing globally, I'll talk about UAE. every time I'm in UAE, it's amazing the training that starts at the school. And I'm talking about elementary school, not about colleges. They start at the elementary level to train the future generation how to use AI responsibly, not just, going and chat GPT or anything, but really training at that level. The fundamental where we are starting is then they are starting to train their entire workforce. Training is the most important thing, and that is what's going to define where the fragmentation of global south and global north comes in, and also how can we elevate humankind in this whole entire era. So my advice has always been the same. Leadership matters in this, and redesigning your work based on how you're going to embed AI and digital into your entire workflow, your work processes, and the outcome. So one example that I'll pick on is actually in your field. For the longest time, we thought with AI, radiologists is going to go away. And that's the opposite. AI has augmented their work. Now you can see more patients, you increase your revenue, and you also increase your touch point, the high touch human point that cannot be replaced by AI. So that's what I have to say.
Awesome, thank you so much. I have a sense that we're going to land on a common theme, and that the end responsibility lies with humans and not with AI. So rather than ask you two to respond to this, I think I'm going to first address a question to you, Evan, and then we see how we can wrap up with the perspectives of all three of you. So you already said it, but you started maybe also to answer the question. You are in a field that is really important to all of us. Healthcare, right? So how? Yeah. But there's no two ways about it, right? So what are your key concerns, or what do you see as the key opportunities? And there might be two sides of the same coin of the rise of AI in healthcare.
Well, it's a good question. One of the benefits of understanding healthcare, like just to start with, is everyone loves data, right? You start with, big data, but having a perspective in healthcare and understanding how the data is created, the validity of the EMR and the healthcare that's used to start to base some of our decision making, it's important for a human in the loop to validate whether this is really accurate data or not. One of the challenges that you would think with all the, Epic is a huge company, very successful. They have tons of data, but the EMRs may be not as accurate in terms of taking care of your headache as you would think. So again, it's understanding where you build the data from. 2, you talked about decision making. It is critical that decision making still includes a human in the loop. I don't see that necessarily changing, because information is important, but it's a two-way lens. When you take care of someone, it's a two-way lens. The touch points on physical exam with a conversation on top of diagnostics is what's going to get you the answer that you're looking for. So I don't see that necessarily changing, but to your point about radiology, it augments the value or the volume that you can do. And it also could be used as a guidepost to make sure you're not making critical errors, because it can evaluate things if you go outside the scope of what you're trying to accomplish. So here's the information. This is the basics that the patient's coming in. For example, a case study at the Houston Methodist is we have a whole bunch of data when patients are in the ICU. It is now processing that data to stratify who's more likely to have a event such as a code prior to its existence. So that kind of technology and the use of AI, but it doesn't trigger any orders until someone is notified, which is the caregiver is notified to reassess and validate before action is taken. So I think those are the steps. I see how that is what we're working towards, because again, the prediction of who's really going to get sicker is another utilization of AI. When you start looking at the variables, like who's going to be readmitted to the hospital was what we're working on. Who's going to get an infection if we keep doing this? Who's more likely, and maybe develop strategies around it. So those are some examples, specific case examples where it's currently being worked on and improved. But again, validating the response you get is where the human in the loop is going to need to stay. So the learning or the teaching for the future when you go to med school may be, how do you validate that the information you're getting augmented is not a hallucination and it is actually actionable in a way that has value in the outcome?
Awesome, thank you. So to Alex, Hema, thoughts on this? Maybe not specific in healthcare, but the decision-making element here?
Now, that decision-making element, especially when it's involving healthcare, energy, finance, critical infrastructure, human is always going to be in the loop. Because when you take human out of the loop, you lose trust and accountability. And those are the critical elements, because AI reads data, as much data as you get. But again, back to whether you can trust the data. We try to cleanse the data as much as we possible, make it as trustworthy as possible. But human being, bringing the experience and knowing what has happened in the past, that's why you cannot replace a human, especially when it comes to critical decisions.
Yeah, maybe I'll be the slightly contrarian. So there you go. You have to have a contrarian. So maybe I think of the sort of decision making in a sort of a nuanced way. I agree that the work itself is fundamentally going to change, as we've been talking about. When people ask the question of, and I get the question a lot, is AI going to replace humans? I think the essence of what they're asking is, does the work I do today get replaced? Not necessarily the human, but it's the work that I do. And I do think some tasks will be replaced, but new tasks will be created. So there will be higher value type activities where, yes, we humans will still participate. That includes decision making. That includes other tasks as well. But the more transactional tasks will be replaced. I also think that applies to decision making. There are some decision making which today we humans do, which are more transactional type decisions. Those will likely be replaced with agents talking to agents and making those decisions. The critical decisions, no. The financial decisions, medical decisions, I think, no. But the more transactional type decisions, of which there are millions that we as humans do today, will likely be replaced. And that will drive speed and acceleration and give us more time to then actually focus on the more critical decisions. So I view it as a positive, because we'll be able to actually focus on what matters and have AI tech take care of the more mundane tasks, which do require decisions. But agents can take care of those.
Okay, so can I respond to it?
Yeah.
Go for it.
When you look at your role, it has a purpose. And the purpose of your role, the task is a part of your job, but the role itself has a bigger purpose. So as you're looking to define your company and as an individual, even your role, really understand what is your purpose of your role and what are the tasks that you can actually use AI to automate, which I use a lot of it. And really understand your purpose. What is the bigger picture you're trying to achieve and that impact that you bring, because that AI cannot take away from you.
Kind of awesome, rather than going for whether it's contrarian or not, whether I kind of understand that there might be sort of an integrative position here, which is that part of managing the rise of AI, like a new management challenge that we didn't have before, is making the decisions about which decisions we are comfortable outsourcing to AI and which are the ones that, for trust reasons and others, we really think that the final decision maker should be human. Would that be sort of a fair integration of what you guys said?
I would say start small, define a task or a workflow that you feel, okay, this is not highly critical decision, and run it through many times with AI until you get comfortable, and then roll it out at scale. Don't try to roll out something at scale before you prove it in a smaller cohort group.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I like the way you. I'm probably going to plagiarize you in the future, but I like the way you framed it. I think that is true. I also use the following analogy internally with the teams. Today, human to human, when we have in our hierarchical structure, I delegate work to someone. That someone that I delegate work to is making decisions. It happens to be a human, right, and so forth down the chain. Well, some of that can be automated in the future. I think your point is valid. Which ones, yes and no? There is some criteria, obviously, because of trust, etc. But I think some of it will be automated.
Thank you. So it's really, it's really tempting for me now to start all the questions that come to my list. But what I think we should actually do is see if there's some questions from the audience and use the opportunity to use our Q&A time as well as possible. So I think the way we would go is if you have a question, raise your hand, and we have microphones floating around here, and you can ask it with a mic.
So a lot of this discussion is talking about within an organization how you can use AI. In the energy industry and manufacturing, you have a supply chain that involves lots of other companies. It can be global. So I guess one of the questions is you can try to move your organization faster and faster, but if there's a log jam in another company that you're relying on. So I guess that's the question. How are companies now going to partner with their supply chain to incorporate this knowledge or this technology also?
Thank you. I'm guessing this is a question that all three of you have been thinking about. So anyone who's ready to go for it, go for it.
I'll have to say the winners and the losers in this is company they'll adopt faster. And if you have, supply chain is obviously a constraint even to Microsoft. Like I always tend to say, we don't have issues buying power to power data centers. We have issues with capacity. When I say capacities, it comes down to the chips and everything. So we obviously have a supply chain issue as well. But what we are starting to see is there's a lot of startups today and new companies that are coming into play that are able to be very agile and replace your traditional supply chain companies as well. And as you're looking to further your company, if your company is moving further ahead than your supply chain, start to expand your scope of your supply chain. Who are your providers there? Because today I am starting to see a lot of disruption in the market because of new technologies, new companies that are adopting AI and streamlining their supply chain faster than the traditional companies that we buy things from.
I tend to definitely agree with that answer. That's the same thing we see. It's going to happen one way or the other. So when I think of that system that I talked about before, it doesn't have to be a system just within the boundaries of the company. It's a system across the ecosystem, the larger ecosystem that actually makes the company work. That could be other partners, joint ventures, people, but one way or the other, we will do it. And so these startups, I totally agree. They're knocking on the door and saying, we're ready to go. And we want to go. Well, we have a traditional partner. We have somebody that's ready to go. You would have to make decisions on, do you wait or do you go faster? But I think there'll be everybody will be moving towards speed. Otherwise, you'll be left behind.
Thank you. Evan, also thoughts on this? You already started talking about the multi-stakeholder field.
I'm no expert in supply chain. But just as an anecdote, COVID was a real disruptor for what healthcare in general and Houston Methodist, I can tell you. And even though COVID is done, it still has that same disruption. So we still have issues with supply and delivery and the economics in terms of the inflationary costs that go into it, which healthcare is not great at absorbing in a way we just can't raise prices. So I mean, all those pressures are putting small vendors that Methodist does like to try to experiment with on how to do it better, have better opportunities to, it's almost like iterating their business with a large company like Methodist with the value of providing efficiencies is kind of the model that we use through the Center of Innovation. So to your point, supply chain is a huge ecosystem. We participate in it. And we participate with vendors who participate in larger organizations and ecosystems, but to find the ones that are the most efficient for us, because we have significant budgetary constraints when it comes to volume and products and cost, because that's where we're very sensitive.
Thank you. I saw some other hands raised. So if you can get the mic there. Awesome.
Okay. I am hearing from from three of the four of you. Let's put on the brakes for reliability and for trust and for human touch. I'm hearing from one of you, let's go to speed. I'm hearing from Elon Musk that in 3 years, the surgeon will be replaced. I'm hearing from Anthropic that now the SWE is being replaced. Now, as a SWE, I say, why can we not put human touch and trust and reliability into the AI?
I heard I was being replaced, so I'll answer it first. So I thought I'd just defend my job here. Elon Musk also said that if you move atoms, you're more likely to stay in jobs, and I move atoms as well. Conceptually, just to give you a context of robots in surgery or the AI technology, here's a concept to keep in mind about the challenge when you deal with taking care of people. The end point or the goal of taking care of some human being, every human being, is, do you feel better? And that is not a scientific, like, gravity. So your output, what your goal is for everything you do, and just like the last concept is the placebo effect. Everything in healthcare has a placebo effect, which is an unexplained positive outcome when there should not have been one. And when you do surgery and when you do take care of people, those two concepts of, are you feeling better, and a placebo effect, make the need for a human in the loop essential. And so, although Elon is an amazing individual based on his success, it can enhance how we do things on increasing our opportunity to take care of more people, meaning we can address the demand issue with technology, but the technology will never replace, in my opinion, the human contact point that is essential in at least taking care of human beings. And I don't see that changing.
You guys, any thoughts?
No, I was going to say, could you imagine a robot coming and telling you your aftercare? Or would you prefer a human coming and telling you your aftercare? I mean, it's as simple as that. The human touch will never go away. And I mean, I see this all the time. People do ask a lot of questions of, robot, for example, in the energy industry. We're starting to see a lot of robots in the energy industry, but those are at high risk areas where I came from the field. Those are areas that you should never put a human in. And today, robots can go in those high rate areas that we call it. That's where we see robots coming into play. But at the end of the day, the decision that robot makes there is driven by a human sitting in a control center. So back to healthcare, I would prefer a human coming and doing my aftercare versus a robot.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. In terms of healthcare specifically, I think human in the loop is going to be critical for the points that were made. I concur that I would prefer to talk to a human. But I think that you asked an important question about should we build trust into the AI models, which therefore enables some, not all, but some more decisions may be made by AI. I think it's a very fair question. It's something that we're trying to do, is to put more trust in there. So how do you make sure that if an agent talking to an agent, that there's trust between those two agents, that you allow that trust? How far do you allow that trust to go? And if you set it up right, yes, it can enable you to delegate, just like you would delegate to a human, delegate some tasks now to AI, because you have the trust that augments how much decision making you allow AI to do, which again frees you up to do higher value items, like in healthcare, talking to your patient, instead of doing the lower value add decision making. We don't have to answer here, but just think through in a day how many decisions you make. And now put those decisions in irrelevant type decisions. They're very, very small type decisions, but I have to make them. Then there's some that are kind of important, but not critical. And then there are a few that are super critical. It's probably a spectrum. The lower end of that spectrum is what, in my mind, would free up time that I can now spend on the higher value items. And if you can put more trust into the AI, agents talk to agents, maybe you can move the needle a little more, again, giving you more time, which then creates new business models, creates opportunity, more growth for humans.
Thank you. Great insights. I saw several hands also in the middle here. So if we can get the mic out somewhere where hands are raised.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Ryder. I live here locally in Houston, and I write a lot about leadership, AI integration. And the biggest touch point I do is not to lose the human touch. So I break the rules right now and say, I don't have a question. I have a compliment for the panel. But even before I was able to take my turn, I wanted to acknowledge the fact that all of you in all different spectrums are acknowledging the human touch is not going away. I think that's incredibly important. I think part of the resistance we're getting, whether it's leadership, whether it's new hires, college graduates, is that, is my job going to be replaced? Is my role important? What am I going to school for? What am I training for? What is my 20-year career so far? Is it going to be replaced by a program? The ethics and morals of all of this is what really is going to come down to it. It's not just leaderships and decisions. Of course, that's important. But there's ethics and morals that can't be trained, or please don't train it to do that. That's terrifying. The New York Post just wrote an article about the vending machine test. It failed miserably in regards to ethics and morals, but it succeeded in business. But how did it succeed? It lied, cheated the system to produce the right data and the numbers, but it did so unethically. So I thank you, the panel. I would encourage you to continue to talk about integrating humans in a real way to empower everyone to use this technology.
Thank you.
Can I just
Absolutely.
Can I just give you an example of? I think maybe it's helpful. How are we using AI? What project are we currently working on? Because maybe that gives you some insights into, because everyone here maybe sees the doctor at some point. So understand, maybe I'll give you an example to the point. Technology is very important. What we're trying to do is use the AI and surround it with the correct data that when you see to create access, because we have a huge challenge in seeing a specialist. Say you have an example, rheumatology, maybe 6 months to see someone. So what we're trying to do is create the right technology, the right system where that neurologist or rheumatologist that has 30 years of experience, Malcolm Gladwell, when he sees patients, generates a certain amount of information over the 30 years. Can we pull that data? Can we structure a learning tool that is accurate and then provide that in the room with some provider that may not be the physician, but may be an extender, so that you don't have a 6-month wait time, so that you can actually start to get the care you need and not wait the 6 months. And then when you get to the specialist, after you've tried 1 or 2 iterations, you're so much further along, and perhaps you've prevented some progression of the disease that is unnecessary because of the wait time. So to your point, that is where we're really focusing on validating, can that tool be done so the decision that is generated from that experience is valid for that patient when you're seeing them and is accurate to a 10th degree, that is going to get okay, here's the medicine you take, and it's not going to create a problem. That is the focus of what we're trying to do with the technology and an example of it. So hopefully that gives you perspective.
Thank you. Go for it.
Thank you. Thank you to all of the panelists. I have a question going back to change management that you talked about, and each of you spoke about this, but how are you holding leaders accountable when the culture resists, and what does good look like in the next 12 to 48 months in your book?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't have the perfect answer, but I'll tell you what we're trying to do, and it is hard, and that's why I said up to 3 it was number 3, and again, Anoop talked about this as well. Here's what I believe in. You have to really do a fantastic job and a deliberate job of highlighting what you expect, and when that occurs, that hey, this individual did that, and that was exactly what I wanted. The proverbial reward and make it widely dispersed knowledge that was what we wanted. A key example of this, which sometimes is actually really hard to do, is we say these things, but it's hard to actually implement, is we ask somebody to go fast, And if you fail, that's okay. Learn from it. But when they actually fail, we tend to look at it and go, oh my gosh, why did you fail? Right? Even though we said in the beginning, hey, if you fail, don't worry about it. So having the fortitude to stay true to that North Star of saying, got it, you failed, let's go try again. I think that's one. The second one is backing up the team when we say we're doing this today. We're not doing POCs anymore. There are no more proof of concepts. There's no more slow starts. We're going all in. We try something, we're going to try it at scale right off the bat. And when you say that, you have to back the team into it when something goes wrong. Because when something does go wrong, it's going wrong at scale because you're going big. So making sure that you have the fortitude to do that, I think, is critical. So the change management actions are not fundamentally different than the things we've done in the past. I think the difference is the scale at which it manifests itself, which means you have to have greater fortitude in staying true to those items. Because when you're making those change management decisions in the past, you had more time, it was more contained, it was very specific in your area. So staying true to those items was easier. Now you're doing the same actions, but the magnitude is much bigger. The time is much more constrained. The impact is huge. And so staying true to it becomes a lot harder. So you got to stay true to it, and you got to have conviction that what you're doing is the right thing to go do, because you will get the pressure to let's go back to doing the POCs. Let's go back to the sort of slower one. So from my perspective, is the actual levers are not different. The impact that it will have on you, politically, organization, etc., is much greater. Therefore, you have to have conviction and stay true to it.
I was going to say, if you say 12 to 18 months, where I would like to see organizations really training everyone, not just a selected group of people, but giving the opportunity for everyone to be trained and upskilling your current employees and your future employees. But the other part too is, I am in the energy industry, where I see if you've tried something and it's failed, share it. Especially when it comes to safety, emission, and cybersecurity. Those are the three areas where I see the industry should collaborate and not compete. Any lesson learned on that, share it openly in your forums, share it what worked, what did not work, and what. So that really sets you up for success as an industry.
Thank you to our panel, to Don, Alex, Evan, and Hema.